Welcome to Season 1 of Margin Talks by Finaloop, where we help explore the flow of money in e-commerce. Today, I have Samantha Rose on the show. Sam is one of the best follows and listens in consumer products. She's an exited consumer products founder with Gear and sourcing company Manifest. She's a partner at a consumer investment firm called Hologram and founder of an ERP platform called Endless Commerce, which is coming out of stealth shortly. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And wow, that was a mouthful.
Yes, you. I know that you're very busy, so I extra appreciate that you're making time for us.
No, it's my pleasure. And I just wake up early. That's how it all gets done.
Amazing. I love that. We both buy distressed consumer brands. There must be something wrong with us both, because there aren't very many of us. What got you into looking at distressed opportunities?
I think I'm really deeply and sometimes insanely motivated to help other founders. And that was not a grad school thesis type of a thing. It's just sort of an observation about myself. A lot of the businesses that I'm either have founded myself or am involved in are like how to make the job and the journey easier. And sometimes that means making the end of the journey easier. So doing everything from supply chain management, consulting, fulfillment, building ERP software, and then buying brands kind of ties into that, what's apparently an intrinsic motivation of mine, because I keep coming back for more.
Totally. It's these special situations where often the founders need the most help, because if you're crushing it and you're growing and you're profitable, you're in a pretty good spot. But if, things are going a little bit sideways, then yeah, there's probably a lot of value that you can add. And so it sounds like, in an interesting way, you're really in the business of helping founders. It just so happens that sometimes you end up buying them.
Exactly that. Yeah.
I believe you've publicly talked about your first acquisition earlier this year, which was Rooted. Tell us, what is Rooted? Tell us about that M&A process. We'd love to hear more.
Absolutely. So Rooted is a direct-to-consumer plants business that was founded by a couple of really great guys who we still work with today. So there really is mostly happy ending to this. And Ryan's our business partner at Hologram. So we've definitely found a kindred spirit. But we did in the whole team there. There's a couple of kind of key moments that brought us to the Rooted moment. The first of which is this affected all businesses, and it also affected my supply chain management business and 3PL business. Consumer goods is in a tough moment. And we at Manifest felt some downstream effects of that. And it took a little bit longer because, of course, we've got a warehouse full of inventory and it's being shipped. So when new inventory isn't being sent to us, okay, well, we're still a little insulated because we're shipping everyone's stuff. But people started to design fewer things and manufacture fewer things. So that affected the Manifest business directly. I thought, okay, well, how else can I be helpful here? How can I help my own business? And what other version of the kind of superpowers that we have in product creation and brand creation and getting stuff out into the world and helping it move around? How else can we kind of use these capabilities? And that turned into an accelerator model, which is really interesting, as different than buying a business, and it's different than wholly owning a business. But we started to make tactical investments into founders or products that we felt had a lot of potential. So that was some of the beginning of me kind of investing in things that were outside of my own little personal ecosystem of manias. So we're building that business and kind of learning more about operating multiple brands in a portfolio effectively with varying levels of responsibility. And a friend introduced me to Ryan one early Saturday morning. I said I woke up early. I checked Slack one morning and I had a message from a mutual friend of ours that went something like, my buddy's running a process for his business and he's looking for people that are interested. And I raised my hand and I'm like, I'll talk to anyone, which is true. And I'm saying that to the public, find me, no matter what kind of help you need, or just to shoot the breeze, because I genuinely enjoy connecting with other founders and anyone who's kind of got that or operators, folks who've got the entrepreneurial spark are some of the most interesting people in the world to me. And Ryan and Kay are two of those people. So I get on the phone with Ryan at now it's not 5 a.m. It's, 7 a.m. He's on the East Coast and I'm on the West Coast. And I'm like, hey man, what's up? And he's sort of thinks that we sound kind of suspicious. And I'm like, well, your friend said that you needed help. So I'm just kind of standing up. Anyway, one thing leads to another. And we were able to find an exit for that brand and an entrance into kind of like the Manifest ecosystem. And their team joined our team and our team joined their team. And we really combined forces to pull off what we thought was a good next piece of the strategy, which was like to broaden the portfolio of goods that they were selling and also to expand the number of marketplaces that they were selling into. So it was a smallish transaction. It was pretty quick. And I think that had a lot to do with timing for the business, our ability to deploy capital quickly, and also the cultural fit, for what it's worth, of their team and our team. So all of those things kind of like lined up to be check marks that around the corner have become a thesis for Hologram. But at the time, we're just like, this feels right. And we're doing a good thing in the world. And we really like the potential of the brand and also the people involved. And I hope I speak for the entire group when I say that I think they feel the same way too.
It's always amazing when you can turn a special situation into a good situation. And it sounds like that's kind of happened here. I doubly love that you got the Slack message at 5 and were able to hop on a call at 7. Sometimes these things need to move very quickly, and there's nothing more energizing than working on a live deal. So, totally get that as well. We've talked about your buy-side experience. You're one of the very few founders who have had buy-side and sell-side experience. You founded Gear, a kitchenware business, which you sold to Pattern Brands. What was Gear? What was the inspiration behind it? And there aren't enough stories of successful exits. So please share that part as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Gear started as again, back to my lack of a graduate degree, and like this was not an MBA thesis. I think that's going to be the title of a book one day. But I just and was annoyed with my spatula and broken. It was in my hand in 2 pieces. And I thought, well, why don't they just make this out of 1 piece? Then it wouldn't have broken. Did a quick Google search and then a longer Google search and then like an everywhere retail deep dive. I'm like, why does this not exist? It really should. It's so obvious. And what's interesting is there's not that many great ideas out there. It's not so often that a super obvious and, as it turns out, fairly easy to achieve thing is just not in the world. So I was kind of stymied at the time. I'm like, okay, well, let me figure out why this doesn't exist. Is it a manufacturing limitation? Does the technology not exist? That doesn't seem like it makes sense. And does nobody want one? No, this is rad. Everyone should want one. Is it too expensive? Silicone's kind of expensive. So I just started to deep dive and educate myself on all of the pieces and parts that might need to be involved to bring this thing to life, which included ordering a bunch of silicone mixing kits on the internet and making a mold and then making a prototype. And I was like, oh, this works. This is so cool. Let me make 10. And I've said this so often. So if you've heard me talk on other podcasts or written anything I've written, the punchline of my life here for the record books is you can't make 10, but you can make 10,000. And that I heard from a factory that was laughing at me because I thought, well, if I'm going to make this as a cooking utensil, clearly there's probably some compliance involved. And I don't want to kill my grandma. This is going to be her Christmas gift. So I went to factories to do it the right way. But to do it the right way, you kind of have to be at scale for a lot of things, including for this. So I made 10,000 and I crowdfunded it. And I think I was very advantaged by 2 things. The novelty of taking this very basic utilitarian thing that everybody, can you think of anyone that doesn't have a spatula? We all know what it is. We all have one in some shape. And just kind of that slight disruption of rethinking it. This is so basic. But then also Kickstarter was really in the news. Being a crowdfunded business product founder at the time, that in and of itself made the news. So I had these 2 things, an object that everybody had and needed and wanted and knew and was familiar with, but with a slightly, kind of a twist on it. And through the vehicle of crowdfunding, one thing led to another, and 65 designs later, 600 odd SKUs later, 13,000 bundles and tens of thousands of stores later, that was the ball game. But it just started with me being annoyed. This spatula that broke.
Crazy that such a amazing brand and product can start so simply. But you did exit to Pattern. We'd love to hear about that process. Were you kind of thinking about exiting? Did it happen serendipitously?
Did I like totally answer the wrong question? You wanted to hear about the end, and
Look, I think it's all good.
um someone will use that story. Someone will get energized. So yeah, the end was almost as serendipitous as you said, as the beginning. A mutual friend introduced me to Emmett Pattern. I'd been aware of Jen Lane Legend. Was really, I think I sent them an email once being like, hey, I'm thinking of like a branding refresh. Are you available? And that was right around the time that they were quietly laying the foundation for Pattern and for that house of brands. So when they turned their sites to acquisition, I got an introduction to Emmett, and one thing led to another. And I thought, well, gee, I've kind of in some ways taken this. I don't know. I have a pretty big imagination. I could have kept going, and I was very excited to be in the business. And also, real children are really hard, but business children are, like their own piece of work too. And it was kind of my first baby. I really deeply cared for it. I had given a piece of myself to it. The prospect of selling it was not like top of mind for me. I wasn't looking for an exit, but when I met the folks at Pattern, I thought, these guys can really take it to the next level. Like they can add the rocket fuel that maybe, I don't have to the business overall. And for that reason, and also because I had kind of like started working on our supply chain management business was kind of growing very quickly. And I had started working on Endless, which I'm super stoked about. And I thought, okay, like I've got a few other irons in the fire, like maybe take this one out, let it glow over there, and I'll do this other stuff. So that was kind of how the introduction happened. Again, like timing of the deal fairly quick, I think, on the scale of things. That has everything to do with just motivations being aligned. They were eager to get started. We were in a good position. I don't think that we had too much kind of like stuff to clean up on the back end. We're pretty tight operation. So all of that, and we were debt free. I mean, it just was like easy because it was easy. And because everyone was very aligned and motivated to get it done in a quick way.
I know it was a couple of years ago, but from everyone in the consumer products community, congrats again. And like I said, it's always good to hear of successful foundings, growth, and exits. So you mentioned that you had this supply chain and product development agency manifest that you were, because there's always so many things, bubbling up. Something that you've told me about kind of supply chain and product management in the past is it's a different skill to go 0 to 1 and the activation and inspiration to go 1 to 10,000 like you did, and the rigor and process. I'd love to hear you talk about that for our audience through your experience with Manifest and all the brands that you worked with from a product development and supply chain standpoint. Talk about that difference and kind of what do first-time founders get wrong bringing products to market?
I don't even know if it's them getting it wrong. It's like you and I have talked about before, the thing that will get you in is not the same as the thing that will get you out. And when I say the thing, I sort of mean like the general skill set and motivation. Like those are getting in and getting out are very, very different. And also getting in and then getting from 0 to 1 to whatever, 100, those are kind of different story arcs. The thing that gets us in, I think, and I've, you and I both talked to so many hundreds of founders, I think I've boiled it down to like 2 core things. And it's like creative motivation. Sometimes that looks like product insight or a spark or a revenge product like a spatula. And the ability to tell that story. And so if you have that kind of creative motivation and spark and the ability to share it with others, you can get into being a founder pretty quickly. And there's a bunch of stuff too, operationally, that's made that easy over the past 15 years. Like building a Shopify store is an afternoon. I mean, building it well could be 3 months, but just getting started is a few clicks away. And it's been made, like the user experience is so delightful, really. When I was building my first store, I was coding in Magento. So my more technical skill set, and I'm aging myself now, was really, a part of what allowed me to lay the foundations for commercial success. But the thing that got me in was creative spark, motivation, and storytelling. The thing that allowed me to scale was the technical piece. And I think that sometimes founders get into their businesses and what makes it work at the beginning, telling that beautiful, bright, wonderfully art directed and photographed story to the world, putting up the Instagram feed and all of those visual and evocative and emotional things that like make the start of the business work. Well, they're done. And you can keep doing them. Like you can keep taking new photographs and running new ads and designing new products. But the muscle that you have to start exercising as you scale is much quieter and more thankless and kind of operational. And I celebrate that. Like I'm not quiet about it. I freaking love operations. Like I like to watch. I mean, I will like pull up, literally the car hood and just watch the whole thing run because that's really interesting to me. But it's not as interesting to many founders, I don't think. And so as a good gut check on like, should I start, is to, and I don't know that you can be totally predictive about this, but you ought to think about it at least as like as a prompt at nighttime in the shower, maybe spend an hour just like, I don't know, writing down whether or not you think you would have fun every day, like plugging in APIs to different systems, or like assessing which system to use, or literally taping boxes for 7 hours in a row. And if you're uncomfortable or just like abjectly like refusing to do those sorts of things, then I think you can get yourself into it, but you'll have a harder time getting through it and then getting out of it.
I think that's a really good reminder at this checkpoint of the cycle, because I think that there was a small window, and maybe small is not even the right word. Maybe there was, in fact, a decade-long window of e-commerce entrepreneurs that could focus on the inspiration and the activation component. And there's enough capital abundance where you could quickly build a team of 15 people. And then you could do the other more thankful jobs like fundraising, and building teams and deciding, how snazzy your office space was going to be. We're now back to the reality where it is more connecting APIs and EDIs and taping boxes, and back to founders wearing the multidisciplinary hats. Yeah, I think it's a great reminder for kind of where we are in the market at the moment.
I'm not necessarily ascribing glory or value to either of those things, although the shiny objects are shiny objects and boxes are dusty. But that, like, if you're gonna give of yourself, so I mean, the founder journey takes so much of you, and if you have investment, it's taking some of other people too. So it's really like there's all the skin in the game, and I think it's just worth level setting at the very outset that you're comfortable being uncomfortable in some of those tasks that are going to be asked of you. And I don't know that there's a great place where all of this stuff is memorialized. Like, hey, what you're going to get to do in the first 3 months is this, but like, are you prepared for the rest? And does that spark joy for you? Because if yes, fucking do. Sorry, it's a family-friendly podcast. But like, really go for it. And if no, then still maybe do it, but just be aware that you will need to access those resources that find joy in that work, because it must be done. And I think the other kind of, this is again, jumping up to a little bit more of a macro comment about where we are in the consumer brand's life cycle. But the tailwind toward omnichannel is back. And for a minute, like there was a channel that was a strategy, and it was called DTC brands. But that's just a channel. It's not it can't be your entire business strategy, or maybe it shouldn't be anymore. I suppose it could for 10 years. But the omnichannel journey is complicated and involves a lot of technical orchestration. And if technical orchestration brings you joy, then that is going to be really, really a fun part of the ride. And if not, it might be overwhelming and ought to be just like partnered in order to pull it off.
One of the middle grounds of, hey, 2 or 3 co-founders need to do it all, and thus the, hey, we need to have an 18-person team, is leveraging a global workforce. I think you've talked about this, including on your own podcast, Best Day Ever, that you're a big believer in a global workforce, and you've seen success doing that. What roles do you use for offshore folks? How do you get everyone on the same page? I know you've got some good lessons.
Yeah, I'm proud of our stack, but it's very simple. I'm proud of how simple the stack is. Some of the work that we've most successfully offshored is the more technical work. And I think also AI is like really impacting just how efficient this work can be, and how easy it is to start to get yourself additional capacity. So we've hired offshore developers, we've hired offshore digital spend management. We've had really good success with like giving most of the Amazon kind of like orchestration of certain businesses to an offshore team. But really, honestly, I think those are just the things that I've done successfully. And I don't necessarily think that that's the limit of it at all. I think that you can, in the same way that remote work today is so much more believable, achievable, and practical than it was 10 or 15 years ago. The addition of a couple of time zones to that is really just one further step. And our business, I mean, we've always had, or most frequently had, in-person fulfillment centers where all of our inventory is. And other than that, most of the work has been remote since about 2010. So I think also we just had a little bit of a leading like edge on that, where we were building comfort around working within those asynchronous systems at a very, very early stage, when even then, like, fewer tools for it existed. And now between like Slack and Google Meet, it was like, well, what more could you really need other than like, a nice bedtime?
Yeah.
And like trying to make some agreement around time zones.
You've on time zone specifically, I think I've heard you say that is one trade-off that you're not willing to make, where you'll do a couple of time zone spreads, but you won't ask anyone to do a graveyard shift. You're certainly not willing to do it. And so therefore, why would you ask anyone else to do it? But yeah, being kind of aligned on, hey, we want to map, I don't know, maybe 50 to 60% of the day together has been important to you.
Yeah, I think for the core part of the kind of team, that's really important. When we talk about what I think is a graveyard shift, like really, I just want to sleep between 2 and 4 in the morning. Like I will stay up until 2 and I will wake up at 5. But between 2 and 4, I don't want like a standing meeting.
Fair enough.
Like so right now we have full-time folks in kind of like Asia Pacific, all 4 US time zones, and a couple of people in Western Europe. The time zones that for me personally have been hardest, but again, this isn't like, this isn't a universal comment. I've had a harder time in like far Eastern Europe finding a way of working where I'm like not having to wake up at 4 in the morning, but it's usually because we have a lot of overseas supply chain. I'm the midnight person, or not, maybe not today, but like I have often been the midnight person. And full credit due to a bunch of other teammates who picked up that torch. This is a random comment, but like that was a competitive advantage for me in the early days. And as a supply chain management company, like I will stay up to midnight to like talk to all of our trading partners and a lot of our early clients. Like I think the forest for the trees moment was they really just wanted to be able to go to bed, and I was willing not to.
Yeah.
It's a slim difference, really. So yeah, that's a bit of a personal preference. I think there's also something to be said for, to your point, allowing for like 60-ish or more percentage of the work time overlapping, but accepting that a bunch of it can be asynchronous. I have a harder time with 100% asynchronous work, in part because like, I feel like everybody needs buddies and a manager and like needs kind of some of that human interaction in order to be engaged with the vision of the company. Like in order to feel the stoke, we can't just be emailing each other. We gotta like see each other smile and hear the story of the business. And if that can happen in as little as 1 hour once a week, I'm pretty happy with it.
We didn't get into e-commerce to be finance experts, but we've all needed to learn that to run good e-commerce businesses. I know that you've actually been quite passionate about how important that is in the industry. Love to hear your biggest e-commerce finance learnings and why you and I agree so much that it is so important.
Well, margin talks. Yeah, I think like these were some, I don't know if I learned it at the right time, but let me put it in the paradigm of a spatula for a second. Every time we sold one of these spatulas, we made like a couple bucks. So we had to sell millions in order to make any meaningful money. And if I had been thinking more about unit economics at the beginning, I might have picked a different product, honestly. So on the one hand, gratitude for my naivete because I didn't know enough not to just be excited and ride right into it. But in retrospect, that made the build process so much harder, and it constrained the tools that we had at our disposal for growth. And specifically what I'm talking about is kind of like the performance marketing toolkit that was the main kind of arrow in the quiver for our direct to consumer cohort in the vintage that was my primary build vintage in like 2010 to 2020. Everyone's putting these rad ads up on Instagram, and I'm like, I cannot afford that. If I spend $15 on customer acquisition, I'm going to go out of business like next quarter, not next year, but like next quarter. So I wish I had known a little bit more about margin and unit economics getting into it. Although I guess I wouldn't have started a brand, or I would have started a very different one. But I think that that's the first step for early stage founders, or maybe people that are like in idea zone, and they're like really excited about something that they want to put out there in the world, is to start to do the math on unit economics. And then that leads to a bunch of other math. But like that's at the core of the thing, because usually the product is at the core of your heart, when you're bringing a business to life. I think the thing that I wish I had appreciated at the time is how simple the math is. It's not intimidating. And I was intimidated. I spent, this is a bit of a tangential anecdote, but I spent like a very, very brief time in finance at the beginning of my career. Wasn't super great. I was very intimidated. I was at a hedge fund that it was 2007, and 8. So I was at a hedge fund in the financial crisis. That was short-lived for all of the obvious reasons. But I came out of it a little bit just intimidated about the world of finance in general. And I carried some of that baggage with me, like early days in gear, and it made it hard for me to just like really look at the numbers. I'm like, I'm just gonna build. People will love it. I'm excited. And I was good at the pricing math, but the unit economics math is not hard. It's arithmetic. It's 6th grade math. And if you can level set with yourself, if it is intimidating for you, like it was at the time intimidating for me, and you can kind of just get over that little feeling and just be like, okay, I'm gonna put together a little spreadsheet. We're gonna do some addition and then some subtraction and a little bit of multiplication and division. Like that's it. And if you just commit to that one little piece of it, you will be advantaged over, oh my gosh, so many of the business operators that I've spoken to I've spoken to founders 5 years in, and God love you all, but like I've spoken to founders 5 years in who didn't know what the phrase unit economics was. And I was like, how do we talk about this without me being an asshole? Like you should know how much it costs you to make this product and how much it costs you to ship it. And so how much you can afford to like find customers. And anyway, do a little bit of math. Get comfortable with it.
We got Jacob here from Finaloop to help us decode some e-commerce finance best practices. Jacob, San here talks about unit economics. Can you help explain to our audience what are unit economics and what is the importance of them?
Right, so my unit economics look at a specific unit or all of my specific units and allow me to allocate, on the one hand, the price of that unit, how much I'm charging, taking discounts and refunds, returns into account. And on the other hand, allocate my costs to that unit, meaning all of my product COGS, my non-product COGS that are going into this specific SKU. And if I can be more granular and put my variable marketing costs and if possible, even my OPEX, if I can take specific operating costs that relate to that line of business. At the end of the day, it's kind of like having a P&L per SKU. And I look at my units and I can say, okay, this unit cost me $14 to make, so what can I charge on it that will give me good enough margins? Again, taking my discounting into account. Because if I don't do unit economics and I look at my entire P&L just as one large unit, then I'm going to, at the end of the day, cross-finance. I mean, I could have units that do really well and other ones that aren't doing as well or are break even or even losing on it. But if I don't really analyze each unit specifically, I'm not going to know whether certain units perhaps should be discontinued, or I should be discounting only for some units and not for others. I won't have a really good picture and granular picture as to how I'm doing until I actually annualize each and every unit. And once I do that, I can make the best business decisions possible once I actually have that information.
It's surprising sometimes. There is so much energy and activation about product launches. And I think that is, I agree with you, that is the right place where consumer products should start from. It shouldn't. I know that you and I have joked in the past of, hey, let's put all these inputs for like best attributes of consumer brands, and then GPT will spit out, oh, this is the exact business that should be launched.
It's beyond GPT.
But that the consumer product should come from a place of product inspiration. However, and there is so much written about fundraising. There is a lot written about marketing, performance marketing, especially financial best practices. What are good product margins? What are good gross margins? How are they different for different industries? How variable is cost of delivery based on product category and whether you're going into retail or DTC? These things, as much as whether the product is loved by customers, can make or break a business. And super expensive and hard to fix later down the road. Yeah, I'm often surprised that it's not talked about more.
But I have a book recommendation. You and I have talked about this before. My husband and business partner, Brian, spent 10 years in finance, like distressed credit and more like public market scale. But I was talking through this with him, like talking through unit economics, and he was doing some moonlighting accounting for me and kind of helping me run some ops in the business at like nights and weekends. And he was like, get this book. It's like, it's always on my desk. He's like, in 36 hours, you too can kind of like have the basic understanding that I have. I don't think I've actually made it all the way through these 36 hours, but having this as a reference and sort of just like being in the practice of understanding that like, it's not sexy, but at the core of it, at the core of every business are like, these financial statements, like maybe it is sexy, I don't know. But I recommend this book. It really helped me just sort of get straight and pretty quick on a lot of the basics here. And again, like it's not that dense and you don't have to read it all at once. But it's a good orientation. And if nothing else, it will help you assess the work that your CFO or your fractional CFO is doing. In other words, like you don't have to, as the founder and as sort of the brand vision maker, if that's who we're talking to, you don't have to do all of this work. But understanding how the work is done is not only valuable, but I think critical to success. Not critical to getting in, but critical to getting out.
For those folks listening in and not joining us on YouTube, that was McGraw-Hill 36-hour course on accounting. But yeah, I think your broader point specifically is that it's super important to learn the building blocks of the makeup of a P&L and a balance sheet and a cash flow statement. And like you said, it's more math than it is something scary. Jacob, you won't get a better endorsement from a founder on the importance of financial knowledge. What are your suggestions for founders on financial statement literacy?
All right, so the best place to learn about finance is really just to watch Margin Talks. But with all the jokes aside, I think the most important thing is just to be aware of how important it actually is. I think a lot of people have the perception of, okay, I love my product, I love what I'm doing, I want to spend all of my time building that product or being involved on the ad side or whatever you love doing, and kind of handing off finance to your external bookkeeper or CFO or even your in-house finance function if you're a little bigger. But I think that's really a big mistake, because all businesses, including e-commerce businesses, at the end of the day are built on their financials. And if you want to make good business decisions, which are crucial, again, in general, but especially when you're running an inventory-heavy business that requires a lot of inventory planning and cash planning and understanding your margins, knowing how much you can charge and how much you can discount. You need to just have a really good understanding of your financials. You can't just say, okay, I'm handing this off to my bookkeeper and then I'm going to take the results and give them to my tax accountant and I'm done with that and now I can focus on product. No, you really need to just sit down and dig into those numbers. And sometimes it might seem a little overwhelming or a little scary, but it's not complex algebra. It's really not difficult. You don't need to be a CPA or a finance expert to understand them. You just need to be willing to take the time. And a lot of times you might even have really good input for the people preparing the books who are not actually living your business. And review of numbers always finds mistakes. I can say that from experience. It really is important just to sit down and review the numbers and ask tough questions. And when you do, it'll be a great learning experience and you'll come out really understanding your financials better and understanding your business better, which will enable you to make much better decisions and you won't be driving blind anymore.
On something a little bit rosier and more fun, this wouldn't be a consumer e-commerce podcast without asking, we're around the holiday season. What are one or two of your favorite things that you're either kind of hoping to get for yourself, had your eye on in your cart? What's got you jazzed personally in consumer products land?
Well, I'll first say, so I've got 3 young-ish kids, 11, 9, and 7. And so most of my cart is filled with like Pokemon and like roller skates. And I think I am like a collector of experiences. So there's like concert tickets in my carts. In the world of more kind of like straight up consumer goods, I love anything that can be shared or in a way consumed. So like really good olive oil, but like really good olive oil and like a promise that we're going to have a dinner party together. That's like my ideal gift. Something that we can use together. I also like really comfy slippers in my cart right now. Crocs came out with like some cool looking clogs. I'm like, okay, I actually, full disclosure, I've never owned a pair of Crocs. I don't know if that vectors me in or out of like the consumer good founding cool set. I would have just disqualified myself, but Crocs made a pair of clogs like kind of one. And those are in my cart.
I love that. Well, if you're maybe interested in selling your business to Sam and want to get a foot in or want to pick her brain about kind of your next product launch, there are some ideas to get in her good graces. Sam, thanks so much for spending the time today. For folks who want to double click and learn more about you, where should they go next?
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been a real treat. And I can't wait to return the favor. One of the places you can find me, and in a minute you can find Fan too, is on my podcast, Best Day Ever, which this is a funny note. There are a couple Best Day Ever podcasts. Mine is the one about consumer goods, to be clear. And that's on YouTube and Spotify. And you can also find me at Sorry Robots on Twitter, but I don't post nearly as much as I should. And if you're interested in like a little more on the tech side, what I do, check out endlesscommerce.com. I'm building an inventory management tool that, I wish I'd had as my own Christmas gift to myself a dozen years ago. So you can find me there.
Sam, thanks so much, and can't wait till next time.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Margin Talks by Finaloop. Don't forget to like and subscribe on the channel you're listening to. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to email me, fan@thehedgehogcompany.com. And if you'd like to see what Finaloop can do for your e-commerce business, please visit finaloop.com. We'll see you on the next one.